Hi, this is Jay Yudlowski, and I have another technique here for you on how to retouch eyes in your photographs. So I have a photograph open here in Photoshop CC, and the first thing I want to do is brighten up the eyes a little bit. You can see they're a little bit dark here, and I'd really like to kind of brighten them up a little bit before I move on to doing anything else. So in order to do that, I want to pick an adjustment layer. I'm going to use a curves adjustment layer, and then once I've selected the layer and it's added to my layer panel down here, what I want to do is change the blend mode to screen. Now you can see as I did that, it brightened up the entire image. So what we want to do is mask all this out and then just paint back in the areas that we want to brighten, which would be around the eyes here. So I'm going to come over to our curves layer here. I'm going to click on the mask, and I'm going to press Command I to invert that mask. So now we can go ahead and just paint it in wherever we want to paint in this particular layer. So to paint it in, make sure you have your layer mask selected there. I'm going to use a brush, so I'm going to select B for brush, which you can also see over here, the brush tool. I want to select a soft edge brush, and I want to make sure that my color that I currently have selected is white, because white is going to allow me to see whatever is on this curves layer. The next thing I want to do is lower the opacity of the brush, because I know if I just paint over top, like you can see here, it's definitely too heavy, it's too much, it's way overdone. Now we could always drop back the opacity of the layer, but I'd rather build up the effect than as I'm painting it in, instead of just lowering the opacity. So I'm going to undo this by holding Command Option Z. Command Option Z will allow you to undo multiple steps, whereas Command Z will only allow you to undo one step. So I'm going to come up here to opacity. This is my brush opacity, and I want to lower this to, let's try about 30%. And I'll start with that. And I have my soft edge brush, so I'm going to zoom in on the eyes here a little bit and lower or reduce my brush size. And I'm just going to paint over top of the eye here. Just paint in the whole thing. And this will give you a good starting point here. So if it looks like you need more of the layer showing through, you want to brighten it up more, you can always come back and paint over top a little bit. So I went once over everything on each eye. So say I wanted to brighten up the iris a little bit more here, I would just go back and just go over top of that just a little bit. Okay, so let's zoom all the way out and see how that looks. So here we can see there's before, there's after. So it does look like a little much. So now at this point I would bring back the layer opacity a little bit just to kind of see how I like it and see if I can get it to look a little bit better and blend in a little more. So if we just try 50% here, so that's not too bad. It kind of brightens up the eyes. So you play with that and you just adjust the opacity now of the layer to where it fits with your image. The next step I want to do is I want to create two new layers, and I want to label one, I want to change the name of it to lights, and the other one I want to change the name of it to darks. Okay, so first I'm going to just start with the lights layer here. I want to zoom into the eye, and the first thing I want to do is make sure I have my brush selected again. I'm going to bring the opacity all the way back up to 100%. I want to make sure that I have white selected here, and I want to bring my brush size down quite a bit. I'm probably going to use about, let's start with 5 pixels. Now what you want to do is, as you're looking at the iris here, you want to paint with white on top of all the light areas within the iris here. That's going to look a little funky at first, and you know, you might not understand where we're going, but you'll see it'll work out pretty good. So just go ahead and start painting over top of the whites of the eyes. You want to just make straight lines. You know, anywhere where it looks like there's a light spot in the iris here, you want to draw the lines all the way out if you can. So just start like that, drawing some lines. We'll go over to the other eye, we'll do the same thing. And you can take more time to do a better job and get more of the areas of the eye as you do your images. I'm just kind of moving quickly here to show you the technique. Okay, you can see there's a little bit of brights down here close to the pupil. Okay, so then after we have that done, the next thing I want to do is go to the darks layer, and I want to use black for the brush this time. I'm going to turn off the lights so it doesn't get in the way of what I'm trying to see. And now you want to go and paint over all the darker areas of the eye with the black paintbrush. So you're just going to paint over it. We can see it's all a little darker here next to the pupil. Paint that in. I can see there's some darker areas that go all the way out to the edge of the eye. We're going to paint those in. I'm going to come over to the other eye and I'm going to do the same thing here. So just paint over the darker areas. Okay, now that we've gone over and painted over the lights and the dark areas of the eye, the next thing I want to do is blur the layers. So I'm going to go up to our filter menu here, filter. We're going to go blur and Gaussian blur. So it's going to depend on the size of your image, how much you need to blur these layers, but for this image, maybe we try 2.5, see what 3 looks like. Try 3 pixels. We'll see how that works out. So you want to blur both layers. So we did the darks, now we'll go up to lights, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and do the same amount for each layer. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is change the blend mode for the layers. So change the blend modes to soft light. And zoom out a little bit so you can just kind of see how it's coming together. So you can see it still looks a little overdone here, so I think what we want to do then is drop back the layer opacities. So let's actually do this. Let's make a new folder, and I'm going to put these 2 layers in a folder. This way I can adjust the opacity for both layers at the same time. So I'm going to select on the group here and bring back the opacity. Let's try, say, 50% and see how that looks. Okay, that's not too bad. So you can see here as we toggle it on and off, you can see it just kind of adds a little more contrast to the eyes there, and really kind of enhances the iris as it points towards the pupil of the eye there. So I'm going to zoom out a little more. So that's not too bad. I think that's pretty good. Now, if you think it's overdone, for your image, you can always drop back the opacity even more, and it just depends on how subtle you'd like the effect to be. And for this one, maybe 35% here. We're at 34. It's 35%. Maybe that's a pretty good spot to be. I think that works pretty well. So here's our final image, and I think it was a good improvement over the image we started with, and a good way to enhance the eyes for the photograph. Thanks for watching.